Well, all right, CMI family. Today we are excited to cover maximizing reach, the art of newsletters. And we really truly believe that newsletters are an incredible tool for reaching your community. And we have some amazing experts on the subject. Several of our CMIs will be sharing today, and we do have a packed agenda. So I don't want to take too much time with announcements, but I do want to let you know that this session is being recorded and it will be shared with each of you. So we will have a dedicated Q&A session at the close of the call. And I also wanted to let you know that our team here at Marriage Initiative has created a newsletter package with a step-by-step instructions for creating your own digital newsletter. So if you're interested in receiving that newsletter package, please let me know and I would be happy to share that with you. So let's begin with prayer. And we have Anna Panter of Marriage Initiative, and she's going to lead us in prayer today. So Anna, whenever you're ready, ma'am.
Okay, thanks, Steph. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, I ask that you pour out just an abundance of blessings, of clarity, of direction, of wisdom and discernment for every city and every team and every family represented here today. Lord, may you guide their decisions. May you keep them in unity. And Lord, just giving them a spirit of sacrificial love and energy renewal as they work so tirelessly to serve people in their community. I thank you for each person, how grateful we are for the work that they've chosen to do. We know that it is an eternal work and a generational work. And so, Lord, will you bless the words and the teaching provided today, and that everyone leaves this meeting feeling connected and inspired for next steps. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you so much, Anna, for praying. The first on our agenda today is Paul Kuhn of the Austin Marriage Initiative. And most of you know Paul by now. He is such an amazing thought leader in the CMI family, and we are thrilled to get to hear from him today.
So yeah, you said experts in newsletter. So I will not fall in that category. We've been doing our newsletter in Austin now for probably about 6 months. So we're fairly new, and I thank the Marriage Initiatives because it started with their packet they gave us. So it's a great packet and gets you going. So today when I go through, kind of what I'm going to do is just 15 minutes just to kind of walk you through kind of our process. I want to start off by just talking about kind of what our objectives are for our newsletter. I think they're a little different than some people. So I think it's good to think of a newsletter as more as just a way to share information. And then I'll walk you through kind of our creation process. And really the way the newsletter's evolved at Austin, it's really become the engine that drives our monthly cycle around here. And it does much more than share information with people. It actually puts us in contact with a lot of people. So I'll talk about how it kind of serves as the engine. And I think I'll get through all of that pretty quickly. I should set a clock and look. But as far as the goals of our newsletter, a big part of what we do first and foremost is I really look at our newsletter as a way to really amplify and affirm what people are doing. I think, we struggle because we're a small team here. We don't have kind of a big resource. So what can we do a little? We don't have a social media presence yet. So really our newsletter is the one way we can find events going on in the city and really give some extra attention to them. And we do that both with events, and then we also try to do it with programs. We look at, what we see out there and how do we get certain programs more attention within the city. But on the other side of it, on affirming, a big part of what I think our newsletter is a lot of the people doing the events and the programs around Austin, they're working very hard. And so simply to put their logo and their event in the newsletter, even if no one clicks on it or comes to it, we feel our newsletter is an indirect way to affirm the work they're doing and recognize the value it brings to the city. So I think just doing a newsletter, if no one ever opens it, it affirms a lot of your leaders in the city. And then, of course, connecting is a big one, but there's a lot of different dynamics of how we connect when we do our newsletter. And so we really look at, from an Austin Marriage Initiative, the newsletter being something that we connect with our marriage leaders. When we started the newsletter, I really envisioned it being more couple focused, but it's evolved over the last 6 months, I really see this as a newsletter more of a way to communicate to marriage and church leaders. And while I thought the newsletter would directly connect couples with resources, really what I feel like our newsletter is evolving into is a resource for church leaders to find resources to give to couples that come to them needing help and support. And then of course, it connects churches with programs where we try to elevate the programs. And then a big part of the newsletter for us is connecting us very personally with people we've met. So as we've met people across the city, as we've reached out to churches, we've reached out to pastors, I find it very difficult to maintain that relationship, touching base with them every month, calling them, sending emails. What I really feel like is if we send out a monthly newsletter and they just see something from the Austin Marriage Initiative, once we've sat down and kind of had one of those exploratory meetings like Carl talks about with people, the newsletter is a way that kind of indirectly keeps that relationship going, even if it's not in person. So we really see it as a way to keep momentum going with people. That's a very resource considerate way. It doesn't require a whole lot, and it keeps us connected to a whole lot of people. And the other thing we use, or I use the newsletter for, is I really try to use it to reframe. Carl talked last week about framing people's images. And I think marriage initiatives, from my personal perspective, a lot of it is we have to change the way people think about marriage. So we have to normalize marriage and relationship education is something that everybody does. I try to word our newsletters in a way that every church is doing this, because I actually want to kind of stir up a need within the people who receive it that aren't doing it of, hey, wow, maybe I should be doing date nights, or maybe I should be doing this, or maybe I should be offering that. So we always try to include some phrase in our newsletter that kind of talks about the way all of us envision marriage ministry being, and kind of not the way it's out there in the world. So we indirectly, in very soft ways, try to reframe people a little bit each month. So those are kind of our goals, and I wanted to share them because when you do a newsletter, it's important to think of what your goals are. And these might not be yours, but I think that does a lot more than most people think. And if you stop back and think about it, it really lets you kind of get motivated about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So we do questions at the end, so I'll just keep going. Our newsletter actually goes in two processes, and I want to talk about that. Half of what I consider our newsletter is content, and half of our newsletter is actually what I'll say context of connecting with people. And we have a personal goal in Austin when we launched this is to grow our newsletter 10% every month. And we've done that for the last 6 months. Now, I think we've grown to a level, I'm probably going to back off that and look to grow like 10% a quarter now, just because we started around just over 300, and we're about 600 now. But that was definitely a part of our process that we invested some time in. So I'll talk first about the content and kind of how we go about collecting content in newsletter. This isn't the one and only way, just happens to be ours. I always start with the Sammy newsletter. I kind of wait for the Sammy newsletter. I always I always know it comes out in like the first couple days of the month. And so I'll usually take 2 days of the second week of the month and I'll just block them on my calendar way in advance. The first Monday, Tuesday of the second week of every month is blocked for a newsletter. And so the Sammy newsletter comes in. I also, throughout the month, I have an email folder that I just created. And then as I get emails from people or I see something online, I'll send myself an email that says, put this in the newsletter. And I'll just drop things in that folder. And so the next thing I do after I get the Sammy newsletters, I look in that folder to see what I've collected in there. And I'm not talking a lot of stuff. I usually have like 2 or 3 things in there. So don't think like the whole world's sending us stuff. And then the next thing I do is I go look at known sites. So there's a couple people who do events regularly. There's a crisis center down in Houston. We have an affair recovery center. We have relational values. There's probably 4 or 5 sites that I always know are going to have something going on that's some marriage event. And I'll go out and I'll do a search on Eventbrite, and I'll look for things in Eventbrite that are just kind of date nights. I see out there sometimes more organizations are using Eventbrite now to do events. So I stumble across kind of some interesting things there. And then I do the basic Google searches that Carl has taught us, marriage events in Austin, relationship conferences, Gottman, Simbus. I'll just search and I'll just go through and I'll do a search and I'll open up a bunch of tabs and I'll just do search things. And all of these things, as I find them, what I'll do is I'll take that event spreadsheet that we have that we do in our monthly reporting of what events are going on. And I've kind of created a little bit different version of that. And I'll just document all the events I find kind of in that event spreadsheet. And so I know what's going on and when they're coming. And then what I'll do is I'll turn around and take that event spreadsheet and I'll update the upcoming events on the website and I'll populate the newsletter with that. So that's kind of the content piece. And I usually spend about a whole 2 days is what that'll take me to do to pull that together. And as I do that, I get to the end and then I kind of convert it to my contact. I'm like, oh, I need to find 40 new people to add to my mail list this month if I'm going to get my goal of 10%. And so I have 2 main ways that I grow my mail list. And I started with my personal zip code and I did a search for all churches in my personal zip code. And what I would do is I would just go to the church's website and I would do that nice little search technique that Carl taught us. I go to the church's website and I do site, church's website, and marriage. And I'll just find information on that website about who that person is. And a lot of times I just find like marriage at Hill Country or info at Hill Country. I'd say about a third of times I get a real name, but I'll cut and paste that into a spreadsheet. And I'll do that for an entire zip code or maybe 2 or 3 zip codes, depending on how many people I need. And once I get a list of people, I'll shoot them a name. I'll shoot them an email. I'll just do a really short email to, hey, wanted to let you know about the Austin Marriage Initiative. I want to appreciate all the work you do in serving the 78613 zip code. The Austin Marriage Initiative is all about helping churches support marriage ministries. If there's anything that we can do to help you and yours or any marriage events you want us to help promote, please let me know. Here's the newsletter where we post our monthly events and here's our website. And I'll just blast that out to usually about 15, 20 people. And the other thing I do is just what we were learned from Sammy is I'll pick a program, like Reengage, Symbis in Texas, there's Together in Texas. And I'll just find one program that I haven't searched for before, and I'll look up for all the providers of that. And I'll kind of do the same thing with them. I'll put all their names in a spreadsheet. I'll cut and paste all their names and emails into an email, say, hey, just want to let you know about the Austin Marriage Initiative. We're all about supporting marriages in Central Texas. Thank you for your work in doing Symbis and sponsoring couples. If you ever do a public training, please reach out to us and let us know. We're happy to promote any events you're doing. Here's our newsletter. Here's our website. I told you about the introductory email. I told them about adding the MailChimp. And then whenever we do an event, I always add those people to my database. And so that's kind of how we've grown our database in a very methodical way. Like I said, over 7 months, we spent about 2 months just building it initially and just do outreach and personal contacts and other people we know in marriage. And we got to like just over 300. And then we've grown it 10% every month. And now we'll probably shoot it growing at like 10% a quarter. So that's our process. When I talk about how our newsletters kind of evolved into our engine, if I look at this, the 3 things I talked about is kind of this whole, I don't know if you'll see the mouse, all of this where you find these events. Well, as we're going through these and we find these events, I'm shooting an email off to anybody that I can find that is doing anything. And as I go through here and I send these emails out to these churches and these program providers, this kind of mass blast I do, kind of those 3 things, the event search, the church search, and the AIM, all those kind of start generating leads for me. So if it's just an event search, I reach out, I try to establish contact with them. If I get a name of who does it, so a lot of times it'll just be, hey, I saw you did a marriage conference in 2022. I was wondering who at your church led that. I'd love to meet them. And, they'll reply back and say, oh, it was me that did it. And I'll contact them. We'll set up the basic, hey, let's have lunch sometime. Let's talk. And I add them to the prospect spreadsheet. And then I just start working that prospect. So you see, same thing to do with searches. Every time I send out the email to churches, sure enough, I'll get 2 or 3 people that'll respond back to me that says, hey, I'm so-and-so. And I'll be, hey, you mind if we sit down and talk? And happy to learn what your church is doing and how we can support you. And so I always find 1 or 2 people a month this way. And then rarely do program people ever respond back to me. But I reach out to programs too. And so if they do come back though, they feed in the prospect spreadsheet that we keep updated that Sammy provided us. And I've built a couple new fields for it. And I put just details in there. And my goal is to work the prospect spreadsheet every month. I did that really good for about a month and a half. Realistically now, I work it every 2 to 3 months. but I work this newsletter process. And then anytime I have left at the end of the month, basically I'll go through my prospect spreadsheet and start reaching out. And so this process is really when we talked about, a couple months ago when we launched our kind of first networking event, it was this process, doing this for 3 or 4 months leading up to that, that really allowed me to find everybody we invited to that. So that's kind of the high level overview. Let's see, I wanted to put some notes in here for y'all. I talked about we start with 300 as all personal relationships, professional database. We use MailChimp. That was part of the package that Sammy gave me, or Marriage Initiative gave us. It was really good for us. I shared that we really do target. I think couples is great. I really just think couples are more social media focused. So if you're going to look at couples, I think investing in social media might be your best. But we personally in Austin attack the marriage leaders and church leaders with this. Event search, these are some terms. Carl shared that before. And then just since Stephanie always shares the newsletters, I went ahead and gave links to our past newsletters if you just want to see what they look like. I went ahead and included this past months that we just did. And so for us, when I talked about the subliminal things that we do, I really want everybody to get on board. We're going to do a marriage event in November, and I want people to start thinking, oh, there's some energy and I need to be part of it. So part of the marriage movement and thinking that there is something going on in Austin, but I really want to play it up and get them. And then we've had a big focus in our group about how do we do mentor couples. So I highlighted kind of Marriage Initiative and what they're with marriage couples, key people that are doing things in the marriage space. And then here's kind of a local thing. And then basically, here's why I highlight anybody who's doing any marriage event. It's nowhere near as pretty as Marriage Initiative, but I don't have anywhere near the graphic talent. So I simply hijack their logo. I go to their website. I read up what they say. I summarize it, and then I put a link off to their website. So it really is not that pretty. It's not that complex. I'm not a graphics person. This can be done by anybody with a little bit of training. And that's Austin. So I'll be quiet since we have a lot, pass it on, and we'll do questions at the end.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. You always bring so much value and really strategic thinking to our training events, and we really do appreciate you, and I hope you know and feel that. So thank you so much. And next we have Stephanie Mullen of Charlotte Marriages. And Stephanie lives in Fort Mill, South Carolina, which is just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, with her husband, Ryan, and 3 toddler boys. And she spent the beginning of her career as an IT project manager before opening a wedding planning business, which she ran for 7 years. And after stepping away, she transitioned to working for Charlotte Marriages in October of last year. And she's loved every minute of serving and supporting marriages in this way. And she is such a blessing to Charlotte Marriages and such a blessing to the CMI family. I know you're going to enjoy hearing from her.
Thank you for having me today, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for joining. This brief training I put together hopefully will be helpful whether or not you've started a newsletter or you're in the process of that. Just really wanting to go through our process and some best practices that we use at Charlotte Marriages. You are certainly welcome to borrow any of them. No use in recreating the wheel. I certainly borrowed some of them from other folks. And because this is a recording, I went ahead and included my email on this slide here. I'm sure Stephanie will also follow up with contact info, but in case you have any questions or want to chat further, feel free to reach out, or shameless plug, if you want to subscribe to our newsletter, happy to do that as well. So just a little bit of what I wanted to go through today. Wanted to start with just overall, like the purpose of a newsletter before you even dive in, really identifying why you're sending it, who your audience is, things of that nature. Go through some strategies and tips. Then I'll dive into our newsletter planner, which is how I track all of our content. Then I will dive into MailChimp. I'm by no means a MailChimp expert, but I think it's a really helpful tool and can be just an easy way to get started with newsletters, and then go through actually the format that we use. So first, the purpose, right? I mean, before you send out a newsletter, you don't want to just be sending something for the sake of sending it. You really want to identify a few key things. So the first thing, of course, is who is your audience? At Charlotte Marriages, the newsletter that we have is really targeted to marriage leaders and pastors, point people in a church that are trying to support marriage ministry. We're actually in August, which now that I say that out loud sounds alarmingly close, starting a second newsletter that's going to be more targeted at couples, providing them resources. What value are you providing? We thought long and hard before we sent anything out about what we wanted to do, and decided that the three things we wanted to focus on was to inform, connect, and equip. So you want to make sure that the content that you're sending in your newsletter supports those things. So how do we do that? How do we support those values? Well, informing with, basic announcements and events coming up, that's pretty straightforward. Connecting, you'll see when we go through our newsletter, the different sections that we have for that. And equipping, providing resources that are going to be valuable for the audience that we're targeting, which again, in our case, is pastors and marriage leaders. So you'll see what that actually looks like when we go into the newsletter. But I think it's really important to not skip this kind of initial step of identifying what you're trying to accomplish. So you're sending out content that is valuable. All right, so just some kind of strategies, tips, best practices that we use. The frequency, we do a monthly newsletter. If you're just getting started and you're not sure that you're going to have enough content, I might recommend doing something on a quarterly basis and build up to that. Timing, we try to send this the last week of the month. Initially, I was trying to shoot for a specific day, but I really found that wasn't necessary. One, it was just kind of adding pressure to me, and I'm don't think anyone was sitting there saying, oh, it's the 25th. Where's that newsletter? So it gave me some more time if I was, waiting on content from someone or a response from someone that I need to include. And then kind of on the flip side of that, if I had like a registration link included in that particular newsletter and I wanted to get that out sooner, I'd have that flexibility because we just target that week. So that's just what we do. Capturing emails, we host a bi-monthly luncheon, and that's where we get the majority of our contacts for the newsletter. We've also recently added just a simple pop-up to our website. So if someone comes to our website for the first time, they have the option to provide their email. We do dangle a little carrot saying, we'll send you a free date night resource just to entice someone to provide their contact information. And then we add that to our database for our newsletter. Tracking and planning content, I find it super helpful to make sure you just have some sort of tool. I'm going to share mine in a moment, where you can track not only what you are planning to feature, but what you have featured, so that you're not needing to dig through newsletters to say, oh, wait, did I already put that in there? And repeating yourself with the content. This is super simple, but I also just keep a newsletter folder in my Outlook to make sure I just have one dumping spot for anything that someone sends me, and then I move it over to our tracker, which I'll show you momentarily. And then MailChimp, as I alluded to earlier, super great tool. There's a free version. We're actually still on the free version right now. You can have templates in there that are customized, so you're not recreating the wheel every time. You can track your clicks. You can update your contact list there. Just a really useful tool to use. Okay, so this is a screenshot of our newsletter planner. It's pretty straightforward. I have all the months of the year on the first column, and then each column is a separate section of our newsletter. So I just make a simple note to myself what I'm planning to feature or what I've already featured. I'm a little bit OCD, so I highlight once I've sent that newsletter out. But this just allows me to, like I said, not only plan, but make sure I know what I've already sent, so I'm not repeating it. I usually do this like a month or two at a time, but you can see there we've got in October, I have in our look back section a re-engage training conference, because I know we're hosting that at the beginning of October. So that'll be perfect for looking back at the end of that month. So if I know that we have something like that far ahead, I just put it in here right away so I don't forget to include it. And then this is the second tab of our newsletter planner, just really a content dump, just newsletter ideas. I think it's called at the bottom. I don't know if you can see it in that screenshot. I just made this, so no one on my team has put anything in here yet. I know they will, and they're very excited about it. But this just is shared with my whole team, and we'll let anyone just throw something in here. I can check it and say, hey, oh, it looks like there's a class coming up at Carmel Baptist Church. Throw the link in there so I can include the registration. Great. And I know where to put it and who submitted it. So now I want to go ahead and jump into MailChimp and just show you our newsletter. So let me just jump over to the application really quickly. Okay. So you should be seeing my MailChimp on your screen. Once you log in, I'm going to go up to campaigns. Like I said, not a MailChimp expert, happy to help anyone if they're just getting started. I'm going to focus on campaigns, which is where we send our newsletters out of. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump into our recent one and walk through our sections really quickly. But as you can see, you get a nice little data set right here, how many opens, how many clicks. You can also view a full report about any bounce backs, unsubscribes, just helpful info. So I'm going to go ahead and open the newsletter. Okay, so the sections that we include, I always start with just any announcements, pretty self-explanatory. If someone's not going to take the time to read the whole thing, I want to make sure anything that I want to grab their attention with is at the top. And speaking of not reading the whole thing, we do have a pretty good read rate for marketing newsletters, but you really want to bear in mind, the length that you're including. We include just these few sections. I've done less, I've done more, but I just find that what I'm about to show you is a good length for someone to get what they need out of it. Like I said, our values or what we were trying to do was inform, connect, and equip. So we're informing right out the gate, an upcoming event, including the registration link. We do a look back and a look ahead. Not everyone is able to come to every single event or lunch meeting that we have. So I just want to keep people informed and abreast on what's going on in the greater marriage community, and hopefully that inspires them that there's still momentum going on even if they weren't a part of any particular event. So I do a look back. A recent marriage win is just what I like to feature there. So we had the Marriage Hub come to Charlotte, which was super exciting. And then a look ahead. I like to do something that's a bit further down the pipe than whatever I'm doing in the immediate announcement. So I have that Re-engage training conference here. Then we do a leader spotlight. This really serves the connect goal that we had. If someone isn't in person as much as they'd like to be, or even if they are, they may not be aware of everyone in our network and the resources that they can provide, not only to their church, but maybe to a couple that they know. A lot of times I'll feature like counselors here, try and keep that varied. I also have a pre-written list of questions. It's not super long, but that I send out to leaders that I want to feature. So if you're looking to start a section like this, I'm happy to share that so you can just borrow those. And I just find that this adds like a really nice personal touch. Like not everyone just wants to read updates and all of that. This just kind of gives it a little more human touch. So I like that section. And then to serve our goal of equipping our marriage leaders and pastors, I always like to include a resource. So this is our resource realm section. Sometimes I'll do a podcast, sometimes I'll do a book. I kind of mix it up. We do date night resources here, which is kind of like a prepackaged plug and play event guide from a local church. But just something that they can, if they're opening this, they want to get something out of it immediately, they can at least have a takeaway. And then at the end, I always just make sure that my email is big and available. We have a form if someone wants to, feature an event or a class with us, happy to share that form as well. But that is pretty much everything that I had to cover with you all today. Like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. If you're not sure how to get started with the newsletter, you're more than welcome to borrow the sections that we have And thank you guys so much.
We are just so grateful for Stephanie and Charlotte Marriages. They are such an important part of the CMI family. And next, we have the privilege of hearing from Rebecca Kristene of the Maryland Marriage Initiative. And Rebecca is a professional copywriter, strategist, and email marketing specialist. She's really well versed in the art of crafting compelling messages that resonate with an audience and drive meaningful connections. And at the heart of what she does is a passion for helping others and making lasting impact through her written words. And I know that you're going to get a lot out of her presentation today. So Rebecca, whenever you are ready.
Yeah. Hi, guys. Thanks for doing my slides for me. I'm not very good at multitasking while I speak anyways. You can go ahead and pull up the first slide if that's good. So I'm Rebecca, and I'm an email marketing specialist and a freelancer. I run MREC's Marriage Initiative email marketing, and today I just want to give a few tips on how to increase engagement within your newsletters. To truly increase engagement, you first need to evaluate your email performance and then make adjustments. So there are several analytics you can look at, but today I just want to talk about the top two that are tied to engagement, which are your open rates and your click-through rates. You can go ahead and pull up the next slide. So tips to increase your open rates. So first, this is just a baseline, but it's good to know that average open rates are around 35%. Of course, this can be a little different depending on how many contacts you have. The 35% is usually if you have more than 1,000 subscribers. So you're going to see a higher open rate if you have a smaller list. Okay, so at MREC, our average rate's around 60 to 80%, depending on the email. But just from those numbers, you can see 30%, 35%, there's always room to grow. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. So let's go ahead and jump into those tips. Tip one is crafting compelling subject and preview lines. So I really love using emotional techniques. I use emotional techniques to pique curiosity, to convey value, and to establish connection. An example of this is instead of a subject line of like, we have a date night coming up. So the ultimate date night event. And then your preview line saying something like coming August 25th, right? That's just to the point. You can switch things up. You can try something like looking for a fun date idea, like a question to them, and then you're going to love this. So now they're like, yeah, actually I do need, a date with my spouse. And I'm curious what this is. So I'm going to open it. So just little techniques like that. And for the Marriage Initiative in Maryland, we do a ton of our subscribers are actual like couples, people that go to our events, community members. We also have obviously marriage leaders and church leaders and pastors, but it's also just a lot of everyday people looking for inspiration and tips and want to know about local events. So that's just a little example. It seems really small, but it makes a big difference. So I did build a resource page for myself with like different emotional techniques that I've played with and examples. And I'm going to share that with Stephanie that she can email to you guys as like a follow-up after the call if you want to take a look at it. Another thing to keep in mind with subject and preview lines is to keep them short and concise. And check your mobile view to make sure they're not cut off. This is such a big one. I mean, like 70 to 80% of emails are being read on your phone or an iPad. And believe it or not, the preview line is notorious. It's known for getting cut off. It's too long. Your goal should always be to make sure it's short enough that on a phone, it's not cut off. So I always look on my phone after I send myself a test. I check my desktop, I check the email, the links, and then I open it up on my phone and make sure the subject and preview line is not cut off. The rates for your open rates can go down by over 20% just by your preview line being cut off. So again, such a small thing, but it can make such a huge difference when it comes to people seeing your content. The last little tip for the subject and preview lines is limiting punctuation and emojis. Too many exclamation marks, and too many emojis, too many symbols in there. Those are all spam triggers. Again, I have a list of that I can also share. I have a whole list of spam triggers, like different, techniques that you can use there or stay away from, but I also have a list of spam words. So like there's certain words you don't want to use in your subject and preview line as well. It's not really something we deal with a lot in the marriage initiative. It's more things that are very salesy and stuff like that. But it is good to glance at and keep that top of mind. So tip number 2 is using segmentation. It's a hard one for a lot of people, but you should not be sending every email to your entire list. I get it. If you've only got a couple hundred people on your list, you're like, I want everybody to know about this. And it does depend on how long ago you started your list, how long ago you started your emails. But typically, if you have a decent list and you've been emailing for, a good 6 months to a year, you want to at least have 2 segmentations within your list. And I always tell people, start with your engaged audience and your unengaged. So that's just as simple as going into MailChimp and creating a segment where you set up anyone that's opened an email within the last, 3 or 4 months. You can do what feels appropriate to how often you're sending emails. I think ours is set for 4 months. And then I have my unengaged audience where anybody that hasn't opened any emails in the last 4 months. So you can create even more segments from there if you want to get into it. A lot of people, it's too much for them. They end up needing to hire someone like me to take over for that. But you can segment for like people who attended an event or local pastors or leaders, anything like that. So the reason is if you're hosting a pastor date night, for instance, like we do often at MRAC, instead of sending this to everyone, you could consider sending it to the pastors and the leaders or to local subscribers that live locally within a state or two to get the word out. The reason for this is for every email that you can have a higher open rate, your ESP's deliverability and health is going to increase. Basically, this means if you're sending to a smaller audience an email that's only relevant to them, that means they're going to click it, they're going to open it, they're going to click within it. And then the more you have those high rates, MailChimp says, okay, this is like people want to know this information. You have a less chance of being marked as spam, and you have a less chance of being pushed to the promotion tab. 90% of our newsletters end up in the inbox, that's what you want. You want them to see it first thing. So segmentation matters. And like I said, even if it's just your engaged and unengaged audience, create those and then ask yourself as you send out the newsletters, who am I really speaking to? And is there a way I can create an audience of just those people? Tip number 3, utilizing A/B testing. So this is, again, something you have to be comfortable with in an ESP. MailChimp and anything else that you could be using, ConvertKit or Constant Contact or any of those, make it super easy. But I really do suggest testing at least your subject and preview lines. Like just throw in 2 different techniques and see what resonates with your audience. Do they find this kind of humor funny or intriguing? Do they not? Like, is it a different audience, a different age group? Like, who are you speaking to and what resonates with them? Another thing I love to test, it's one of the first things I test for any client I have, is the different days of the week and different times of the day. It just makes sense. You want to know that more people are going to open this newsletter on a Thursday versus a Monday, right? Monday is one of our worst days to send a newsletter. It is after the weekend, their inbox is already piled up with a bunch of emails to catch up on. And sometimes we just fall below and it never ends up getting opened. Versus if I send it on a Thursday or a Wednesday, I mean, our open rates are almost double what they would be on a Monday. So I just want to encourage you, if you're comfortable with it, definitely start playing around with A/B testing. All right, we can go ahead and pull up the next slide. Again, thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk about the other analytic, which is your click-through rate. Now, I just want to clarify really quick. There's actually a difference between your click rate and your click-through rate. So your click rate is the number of people who clicked on the email out of the total amount of recipients that it was sent to. So looking at this number, it really only helps you to analyze your subject lines. Like you're just seeing, are they opening it? Are they working? Are people clicking to open your emails? Now the click-through rates is the number of people who clicked within the email out of those who actually opened it. So this metric actually shows once someone opens the email, are they clicking within it? Are they clicking any of the buttons or the links that you're providing? Are they finding any value in what you're sending them? So the average click-through rate is about 2%. If you're below this, it's definitely time to look at your content, take notes on how to improve, and hopefully these tips will help you with that. So tip number 1, try your best to give one link or one CTA. I know this is hard, especially if you're providing resources, because you want to send everything at once, and that's okay. It's sometimes about balancing the different types of emails. So I just would love to share my strategy with Marriage Initiative in Maryland. We send ours actually the first week of the month, and our monthly newsletters, what I call it, has a ton of links. It's kind of broken up how Austin Marriage Initiative does, right? We have resources, upcoming event, we have recommended podcasts, books. It's just a long list. And I always start my newsletters off with kind of a letter to the subscriber, something personal and something relating to the economy or a hot topic that's up this month, or the seasons or the busyness, or like in August, our newsletter will be talking a little bit about getting your kids ready for back to school or back to college and things like that, and how you can support them. So I always start a newsletter with a personal touch. I don't just dive right into all of the resources. And then I list all those resources out, and I send that first week of the month. But then after that, I break the newsletter up. So let's say I had the date night, or upcoming date night. In that giant newsletter, it was listed under our events. Now I'm going to take the section on that date night, and I'm going to plot that out and put it in another email with just the date night. I'm going to make a subject line, a preview line that are enticing just for this event. And I'm going to send an email with, a great image. I'm going to put some text in there, kind of enticing them to learn more and giving them details about the date night. And then I'm going to give them a button to register. And that's it. Nothing else. Just one CTA, one asking them to do one thing, which is to check out this one event. It sounds harder to do. It's not hard, but it sounds silly to break it down, but we've seen the open rates, the click-through rates, and the registrations just go through the roof because of this. So basically what I want to say is, like, if you break it down, it becomes simple. It becomes digestible for the reader, and your open rates are always going to be higher, and your click rates if they're only being asked to do one thing. So definitely consider and see where you can break things down, resend about an event or a podcast. We did that in June. We had a dad podcast we recommended, and the Intentional Father book we recommended. That was in our main newsletter for June. And then I went ahead and resent each of those as resources with just the information for each of those the following week, like on a Tuesday and then a Thursday. And we had like 80, great open rates, great click-through rates. So, all right. So tip number 2 is to make your emails personal. So if you can give your email personality, a voice, talk like a real person to other real people, it makes a difference. And use personalization like their first name, which a lot of you probably already know how to do using the merge tag in MailChimp, but you can even use that in the subject line. You can use it throughout the copy. It doesn't always have to be like, hey there, first name. It can be a few sentences into your newsletter if you're talking to them. Another way to keep your emails personal is to stay on top of trends and ongoing conversations on social media, basically hot topics, right? This is going to help you stay relevant and top of mind when it comes to these matters. And our third tip is using a simple design. So design does go a long way. If you make your emails too heavy with images and colors, and it can start to feel salesy and heavy and overwhelming, honestly. So if you make all of them text only, though, it's not visually appealing enough to grab their attention. So it's really about finding that balance with simple, like aesthetically pleasing images or GIFs and things that just feel relatable. Tip number 4 would be making them mobile friendly. I know I had this in my tips for open rates, but it matters for your click-through rate as well. Again, send yourself a test and check the actual content within your email, right? Do the images fit well? Is your CTA or button big enough to draw attention? Is it maybe too big? Do your paragraphs look too long? Break them up. In fact, I never have more than 2 sentences together. I'll go in and add a break line. So making sure that when they actually open your email on their phone, is sometimes when you do the blocks where like you'll have an event picture and you'll have a description and you'll have a button. Sometimes in MailChimp, how you have those placed and the right block that you use, if you pull it up on your phone, it's all mismatched. You'll have like 2 images of events and then 2 blocks of the descriptions that aren't under the proper image because the mobile view did something different with it. So I just really definitely want to encourage you to take a look at that and adjust where you need to. Okay, so that is it for my professional tips to help increase your newsletter engagement. Hopefully these insights help inspire and encourage your email marketing game. If you need any advice or want to reach out or connect, you can grab information off this slide here.
All right. Well, that was great, Rebecca. I thank you so much for taking the time. I know that the Maryland Marriage Initiative is so grateful to have you as part of their team, and we are all so grateful that you're part of the CMI family. So we really do appreciate your time today. That concludes our training event on maximizing reach, the art of newsletters. Remember, if you need anything at all, or if you have any feedback on today's event, you can contact me at steph@marriageinitiative.org. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. We love you guys, and we're happy to have you as part of the CMI family.